Hello, and welcome to the very first sequel episode of Let's Read an Indie. Today, we shall be looking at two books, Tears of the Dead and The Bastard Gods by Brian L. Braden, the continuation of the Chronicles of Fu Xi. I will begin by saying that while, of course, I do recommend watching the first video on the Black Sea Gods, you do not have to have watched it in order to watch this video, and I will be avoiding spoilers. I'm mainly going to be talking broadly on the series as a whole and whether it's worth reading. So in these two books, The Tears of the Dead is the second in the series, The Chronicles of Fu Xi, and The Bastard Gods is the third. And in order to talk about the series as a whole, I first want to touch once more on the subject of the low, but also characters in general. So if you've seen the first video I made on the Black Sea Gods, you'll know that I spent quite some time talking about the low, and I was very taken with them because they are a brilliant concept. They are the people group that the majority of the characters that we see the story through the eyes of come from. And it's not just them. There are also other characters who are not of the low, but then become ingratiated with the low or spending a lot of time with the low, and you sort of see the world through how they are viewing the low, which is also fascinating. Now, to give a brief recap, the low are, of course, a water-based people. They have spent their entire lives living on the water by a shoreline, and they live on boats. They learn to swim before they learn to walk. They're a very peaceful and warm-hearted people, and yet we are experiencing this fantasy story from their point of view. And as I mentioned in the previous review, they have not seen much of the world, such as mountains or the horses or things like that, which makes for the experience through their eyes is very rich and makes for amazing world building. This, of course, continues through books 2 and 3, and even though the low are experiencing a lot more of the world and are adapting in many ways through the events that are taking place, they are still very much the low and still a brilliant viewpoint to witness the story through. Now, of course, we get other characters who are not from the low, especially as we start progressing through books 2 and book 3, and we get to see other aspects of the world from these other people's eyes, and also thinking about what's going to happen when certain groups and certain things start encountering the low that we have learnt to care for. But of course, when it comes down to characters, the most important thing is, are we connected to them? Do we care about them? And I can absolutely say that, yes, I do care about the characters. I'm not going to talk about specific characters, because especially as we're looking at books 2 and 3, I don't want to go into any spoiler territory. I will say that I was very connected. I was concerned about the fates of certain characters, and also, especially with certain villainous characters, I am eagerly anticipating them getting their just desserts. And I feel like that makes for a much richer story, and you are very invested when big events are happening and the fates of the characters are on the line. So I feel like that is a very good sign of quality writing. I don't really have much to say in this section, which I always like to get out of the way very quickly. All I will say is in book 3, there was quite a long section that was chapters detailing things that have happened in the past. And I felt like it went on for quite a while, and I was eagerly anticipating getting back to the low and what was happening more in the present day, as it were. But it was still exceptionally well written. As I said, I was just looking forward to getting back with what was happening in the present. But that's about all I can bring in for criticisms. Now this is the subject that I really wanted to talk about in this video. In the original one, on the Black Sea Gods, it was the low that drew a lot of the attention. But this time I think I want to talk about the world building for the series as a whole, because for me, reading books 2 and 3, it was an incredible standout part of the writing. What we get with the Chronicles of Fu Xi is a blend of real-world histories, ancient cultures, and ancient mythologies. We have biblical, we have Chinese, we have Mesopotamian, we have ancient Greek, we have Mesoamerican, we even have the hint at some ancient Egyptian. It is all brought together in a very realistic, natural way that feels so right, and it is revealed to us slowly and surely, and it's one of my favourite parts of the series. And it could have been handled badly, it could have been done cack-handedly, but it wasn't. It was done very well. And I am familiar with lots of sort of ancient myths and stories, and yet I found a renewed excitement in experiencing this world, because it's not just taking mythologies and retelling them. No, it's really shaping an original world and putting characters you care about into it and telling a story that you want to find out what's happening. The world building is just brilliantly done. And to talk about the story that takes place within this brilliantly crafted world, books 2 and 3 are wonderful continuations of what we had in book 1. If you will remember from the first review when I talked about it, the low-face and apocalyptic situation with the disappearance of all the animals and the fish. And these two books brilliantly follow on from what is taking place in very original ways, and adding in more threats as well that you are greatly concerned about. So if you enjoyed book 1, I guarantee you will enjoy what happens later on in books 2 and 3. So, in conclusion, I want to begin by telling a little story. A couple of years ago, I had a Kindle Unlimited subscription, and I thought I'm going to read some self-published indie books. And I got some out, but I went on Amazon and got ones that were recommended with lots and thousands of reviews. And I started reading. And they were bad. They were really bad, and it sort of dampened my hopes of enjoying reading indie books, even though I was an indie writer myself. But it was recently when I got another Kindle Unlimited subscription and started reading books, and the first one I read was The Black Sea Gods, and I had gone out of my way to look for books with less reviews on them, and that was the first one I read in my renewed journey down into indie books. And I am so glad that it was the first one I read, because it was of such high quality, and I can happily say that the quality is sustained in books 2 and 3. So, my final conclusion of both books 2 and 3 and of the Chronicles of Fu Xi as a whole is that it is chef's kiss. This is an amazing series that is brilliantly written that I highly recommend. Book 3 I actually originally thought was the last in the series, but it is not. It ends on a climax, and there is another book coming. I do not know when, but I am eagerly waiting for it, and when it is released, I will be hopefully able to read it day one, because I am that looking forward to it. That is my heartiest recommendation going towards reading the Chronicles of Fu Xi. And if you're interested in any other kind of fantasy, then allow me to shamelessly self-promote my own work. The Mushroom Knight series, with books 1, 2, and 3 already out. This is a fantasy that gives you the extra mushrooms that you need. Well, that about wraps it up. So until next time, thanks for watching.